For many years, Southwest Airlines stood out in the notoriously difficult airline industry, consistently outperforming competitors in customer satisfaction, employee retention, and profitability. What was their secret? Rather than viewing the company as isolated departments solving separate problems, they applied systems thinking, recognizing how employee satisfaction, flight operations, and customer experience are all interconnected parts of a single system. When faced with industry challenges, Southwest didn't just look for quick fixes. They examined how changes in one area might create ripple effects throughout their entire operation. This systems perspective enabled them to make decisions that strengthened the whole organization rather than optimizing one department at the expense of others. This approach didn't happen by accident. It came about because Southwest's leadership understood systems thinking and, more importantly, knew how to coach others throughout the organization to adopt this mindset too. In our previous modules, we explored what systems thinking is and how it can help create flywheel effects. But here's the thing: your impact as a leader multiplies exponentially when you can coach others to think systemically. One person practicing systems thinking can make a difference, but an entire team doing it can transform an organization. This module will explore how to coach others to adopt systems thinking. You'll learn how to overcome common barriers to adoption, translate complex concepts into accessible language, use visual tools that make abstract ideas concrete, implement practical exercises, integrate systems thinking into everyday work, and measure progress as your team develops these skills. Before we dive into coaching techniques, let's revisit why systems thinking can be challenging for teams to adopt. There are several common barriers we need to recognize. First, deeply ingrained linear thinking habits. Most of us were taught to think in straight lines. Problem leads to solution, action leads to result. Breaking this pattern is difficult because it's not just about learning something new, it's about unlearning something familiar. Second, organizational cultures often reinforce blame and short-term thinking. When something goes wrong, the immediate question is often who's responsible rather than what system produced this outcome. This focus on individual accountability over system responsibility makes systems thinking harder to embrace. Third, there's the perceived abstractness of systems concepts. People say this is all just theory and we need to spend our time fixing problems. There's a misconception that systems thinking is purely academic when it's actually intensely practical. Finally, immediate pressures discourage long-term holistic views. When your team faces urgent deadlines, taking time to map out system relationships feels like a luxury they can't afford. Research from MIT shows that even when people intellectually understand systems concepts, they struggle to apply them under pressure. When stressed, we default to our habitual ways of thinking, exactly when systems thinking would be most valuable. These psychological factors create resistance. People might think, I'll just keep my head down and do the work assigned to me. I know it's not as good as it could be, but who cares? Systems thinking is demanding. If people don't want to do it, you can't force them. But if you can generate interest and show its value, there are effective ways to coach them into it. Let's explore how. The first step in coaching others is translating systems concepts into accessible language. Abstract ideas must be made concrete through metaphors, analogies, and simple examples relating to people's everyday experiences. Using metaphors from familiar contexts works exceptionally well. For instance, when explaining feedback loops, you might compare it to how a thermostat regulates temperature in a room. When it gets too cold, the heater turns on, warming the room until it reaches the desired temperature, then shuts off, creating a balancing loop that maintains stability. Southwest Airlines used an ecosystem analogy to help their teams understand system interdependencies. They showed how employee satisfaction, flight schedules, and passenger experience were all interconnected parts of a single system rather than isolated elements. Remember to adapt your language to different team roles and backgrounds. Your engineering team might better understand examples that are different from those of your marketing team. Always avoid jargon and acronyms, and define everything clearly. Don't assume prior knowledge, especially when introducing new concepts. A powerful tool I've recently discovered is using AI to help craft these analogies. You can define your target audience and the ideas you're trying to communicate, and AI can help you find stories and metaphors that will resonate with that specific group. As Albert Einstein supposedly said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Part of the work of systems thinking is developing a deep enough understanding that you can explain it simply to others. I might need my immediate product leaders to practice sophisticated systems thinking, but a simpler approach might be sufficient for others. Visual tools are incredibly powerful for making abstract systems concepts concrete. As the saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words, especially when dealing with interconnected systems. Start with simple diagrams. For beginners, connection circles work well. These are simple visualizations where you draw circles for key elements and lines between those that are connected. This helps people see relationships they might have missed. As understanding deepens, you can introduce causal loop diagrams that show how these connections form feedback loops. My research uncovered a compelling example from IBM Security that illustrates this approach. Their team faced a complex challenge. Multiple products needed to work together seamlessly, but different teams were developing solutions in silos, causing integration problems and a fragmented user experience. Rather than addressing each product separately, IBM security leadership introduced visual mapping techniques in their stand up meetings. Teams created diagrams showing how user workflows moved across different products and technologies. These visualizations revealed surprising connections, places where teams were unknowingly developing overlapping functionality or missing critical integration points. By making these relationships visible, team members could literally see how their work impacted others. This changed their conversations from my feature to our system and enabled them to recommend unified experiences based on a comprehensive understanding of how users moved through the entire product ecosystem. Most importantly, these visual tools made abstract connections tangible in a way that technical documentation never could. For more advanced concepts, stock and flow diagrams can illustrate how resources accumulate and deplete within a system. But remember, more advanced diagrams are for you, and more straightforward diagrams are for everyone else, at least at first. These visuals can be created on a whiteboard in real time with your team or with digital tools like Miro or FigJam. The key is making them collaborative. There's something powerful about building a visual model together that helps embed systems thinking more deeply than just presenting a finished diagram. Research from educational psychology shows that visual learning can improve understanding by up to 400% compared to text alone. And studies of successful system thinking adoption show that teams who use visual tools are significantly more likely to apply systems concepts correctly. Nothing beats hands on practice for developing new thinking skills. Here are some simple yet powerful exercises you can use with your team. First, the 5 whys with a systems perspective. This is a simple technique where you start with an outcome or problem and ask why 5 times to dig deeper. For example, if your feature launch failed, you might ask, why did it fail? Well, why didn't we catch that issue? Why was our testing inadequate? With each question, you're peeling back layers to reveal system structures rather than just symptoms. Another effective exercise is mapping the ripple effects of decisions. When making a choice, have the team identify all the potential second and third order effects across different parts of the system. This trains people to look beyond immediate impacts. You can also create simulation games, almost like role playing exercises. I've run sessions similar to a game of Dungeons and Dragons where team members take on different roles in the system and play through scenarios. It might feel silly, but it can be tremendously powerful and fun. When facilitating these exercises, make sure you create a safe space for exploration. The goal isn't to get everything right immediately, but to practice a new way of thinking. Give activities adequate time. I've seen leaders try to schedule systems thinking exercises for 15 or 30 minutes, which never works. People get frustrated and feel like they lack time to share and explore. Plan for at least an hour for most activities. The real power comes when systems thinking moves beyond special exercises and becomes part of everyday work. Here are ways to integrate it into routine activities. Conduct retrospectives with a systems lens. While traditional retrospectives focus on what went well or poorly, a systems focused retrospective asks questions like, what patterns are we seeing across multiple projects? Or, how did our actions affect other teams? This shifts focus from isolated events to underlying patterns. Incorporate decision making frameworks that consider wider impacts. One approach I like is creating a business canvas for a feature or product. This tool, typically used for new businesses, walks you through thinking holistically about value propositions, resources, and impacts. Ensure project planning accounts for learning and continuous improvement. One of the things I love about agile methodologies is that they build in time for feedback and adjustment. We have to assume feedback loops will change our direction, and if we're not learning and adapting based on that feedback, we will fail. Problem solving approaches should look beyond symptoms. Use techniques like fishbone diagrams, also called Ishikawa diagrams, to map out root causes across different aspects of the system, not just technical issues, but cultural, communication, and people factors too. Remember, problems are systems, but people invent systems, and systems influence people's actions. It's not about blaming individuals, it's about identifying where the system is influencing behavior and then improving that system. As your team integrates these practices into their daily work, it begs an important question. How do you know if your coaching efforts are making a difference? As you guide your team's systems thinking development, look for observable indicators like changes in how problems are discussed. Are people asking about patterns in relationships rather than just immediate fixes? Shifts in where solutions are sought. Are they addressing underlying structures rather than just symptoms? The types of questions being asked. Are they exploring interconnections and feedback loops? How success is defined. Are they considering longer term impacts rather than just immediate outcomes? Create safe spaces for practice and mistakes. Make it clear that trying new approaches and learning from them is valued, even if the first attempts aren't perfect. As long as the team is learning and improving, they're moving in the right direction. Finally, to make systems thinking stick, work toward building it into your team's culture. Model systems thinking yourself. Team members will follow your example more than your instructions, so demonstrate the behaviors you want to see, asking about ripple effects, considering long-term consequences, and looking for underlying patterns. Make structural changes that support systems approaches, like creating cross-functional collaboration opportunities, extending planning horizons, and developing metrics that capture system health rather than just individual components. Share stories and narratives that reinforce systems perspectives. When a team succeeds by taking a systems approach, make that story part of your organization's folklore. You should also consider creating a community of practice where interested team members can continue learning together and supporting each other as they develop these skills. Coaching others to adopt systems thinking isn't just about teaching techniques. It's about helping people see the world differently. It's about moving from isolated problems to connected systems, from blame to understanding, and from short-term fixes to sustainable solutions. We've explored how to overcome common barriers to systems thinking, translate complex ideas into accessible language, use visual tools to make abstract ideas concrete, implement practical exercises, integrate systems thinking into everyday work, measure progress, and build a systems thinking culture. But remember that this is a journey, not a destination. People don't transform their thinking overnight, but with consistent coaching and support, teams can develop powerful new capabilities for addressing complex challenges. As you leave this module, I encourage you to choose one coaching practice to implement with your team this week. It might be as simple as asking, how does this connect to other parts of our system in your next meeting, or sketching a quick diagram to illustrate relationships between different project components. By helping others adopt systems thinking, you're not just improving your team's effectiveness, you're multiplying your impact as a leader and creating ripple effects that can transform your entire organization.